What's up, guys? We're starting a brand new series today. This is Redsheek, and that's Shoobie.
Hello.
And I think today we're going to start a series that we're calling Car Theory.
Yeah, so what we're going to be doing is we're going to pick out like really touchy subjects that everybody in the car community cannot stand to talk about or always has an opinion on. For example, what would you prefer, a muscle car or a Japanese car?
And then we fight to the death. Well, yeah, we're basically going to be discussing big topics in the car community. Mm-hmm. And I really think that this is going to be a cool series. We want you guys to interact with us. Make sure you comment with this, because that's how we're going to find these topics that we know that you guys care about. And we want to hear your opinions too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We're definitely not going to have every viewpoint, although Shoobie and I are both car guys, and we come from different approaches to the car community. I tend to be more of a domestic American V8 kind of guy.
Yeah, and I'm definitely the kind of guy that likes a small, nimble, lightweight, like Japanese or even a European car. I prefer a Japanese, but I mean,
and so
they're both built well.
I think this will be a cool matchup. We should cover a lot, but we want to see you guys too, because you may have opinions that neither of us share, and they will, I'm sure, be valid opinions.
Oh yeah,
most of them. This is the internet, so
yeah, everybody.
Some of them may not be valid.
Exactly.
But so the first topic that we're going to dive into today is, I made the statement, and Shoobie didn't agree with me.
Yeah.
But I made the statement that the 350Z, or the Fairlady Z in general, is Japan's attempt at a pony car.
And I very strongly disagree on that.
Let me explain myself. A lot of you are sitting there saying, I know many of you are getting ready to fire up your keyboards and tear up the comments section, calling me all kinds of awful things and telling me all the things you did to my mother, I'm sure. But to hear me out. Okay, so I've got a list here of the things that make a pony car. And the 5 characteristics of a pony car are that it is stylish, sporty, with a long hood and a short deck, and what is called open mouth styling. I think most people are going to know what that is, but just in case you don't, open mouth styling is going to be where you have the grill is very large, you have a very large area for the car to suck in air, it looks very aggressive.
Yeah.
An affordable base price. According to this article, it's under $2,500 in the $1965 value, which is when the pony cars really started taking off. What would you say today, that the car is available in what, the $25,000-$30,000 range?
Yeah, I would have to say somewhere around there, probably $30,000.
Yeah, somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
It could go a little cheaper or a little more expensive, but in that range. That it has off-the-shelf mass production components, that they made lots of these cars. Obviously, for the low price, they would have to be available to the common person. This isn't a car that...
It's not like a supercar or anything.
Exactly.
You have to have a lot of money to get.
And a wide range of lucrative options to individualize each car. So not every car that comes off is exactly like the other one.
Right.
And that the marketing for that car is youth-oriented. Tries to either appeal to young people or make people who may not be young feel like they're young again.
Yeah.
Now, my argument would be that the Fairlady meets these 5 criteria.
Now, as I may agree with that, but I feel like a pony car has to have like something above what the pony car is, like a better version of that.
So like a big brother?
Yeah, like a big brother. Like, for example, the Camaro has the Corvette, like, as the big brother.
Okay.
Now with the 350Z, at the time when it came out in I believe it was in 2002 as a 2003 model, there was nothing above it. The Skyline had stopped being produced in 2002. So it was the top dog. There was nothing else above it.
Okay.
And then the R35 GTR came out in 2006, I believe, or 2007. So there was nothing really that had power over the 350Z. So that's my opinion on that.
I see that, but I would point back to Ford's history, and while it may not be true of the Corvette, with the Corvette coming out in 1953 and the Camaro not showing up on the scene until much later into the late 60s, the GT40 was not available until 1969, whereas the Mustang came out in 1964, with the model year being 65, so you may see some 64 and a halves, which I always thought was hilarious because on Ford's part, but it didn't really have a big brother. There were other performance-oriented cars that Ford had, and Ford had some muscle cars that were not pony cars that got much bigger, like the you had the Falcon, which is actually where the Mustang sat on a Falcon frame originally. It was a facelifted Falcon. But you had some other cars that were these large sedans with these big engines that the whole premise was to add sport feel into your daily routine, to have a car that could drive the kids around and be very fast at the same time. But they didn't really have anything that was a supercar. They didn't have anything that was really the Mustang's big brother as far as performance.
Okay, so when did the pony car title come around? Like when was that a thing? Because I mean nowadays you have so many supercars and so many like civilian cars, like for example like a Nissan Sentra or something. But see, so to me, it just doesn't make sense how a pony car could be a pony car when there was nothing above it.
Well, the whole premise of the pony car, and the name obviously comes from the Mustang, and we're going to talk a lot about the Mustang in this episode because it really pioneered that class. It was a smaller version of a lot of the other cars that Ford made, where, like we said, with the other muscle cars, you had all of that power into what was essentially a family car. You know, a four-door, four-seater, designed to be driven around by sensible human beings. And some nut job at Ford said, what if we took all of that power and put it into a tiny little car that only had two doors? And it was never really designed to be your daily driver. It was designed to excite with the driving experience. Okay. And so I would say that the pony car doesn't really have to have a big brother. That the premise was just that it was something... Originally, the premise was something that took from what was already existing and added that performance into a smaller package. And I would argue that they really helped pioneer what we see as sports cars today, because otherwise everything was so expensive and out of reach as far as actual sports cars.
Okay, so what about other cars? Do you think other manufacturers could have caused the Mustang to be a pony car? Do you think maybe the other manufacturers were building better cars and Ford just wanted to make an affordable version of a muscle car? Or what? What do you think?
Well, according to my research, the pony cars were pioneered by Ford because of the success of the muscle cars in general, and across all manufacturers. America at this time, and in many ways still is, was obsessed with power.
Obsessed. Definitely still is.
Obsessed with, your car wasn't just to get you from point A to point B. Your car was something that defined you, and by having a fast car that gave you a sense of power and feeling that just wasn't matched. Mm-hmm. So it was coming off of that success, and there had been several other small cars like the Corvair and the Cutlass Jetfire. These cars helped really show that there was a market, that Americans wouldn't just buy a muscle car. They wouldn't just buy a car with a big engine. They wanted the car to look the part too. Mm-hmm. So that's what really brought the pony car into existence. Was the Ford engineers were smart. They looked out and they saw that they believed that there was a market there. Yeah. And they went for that market.
Okay.
And obviously they did very well.
Now you mentioned a small compact car had to be a category.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now all Japan has really made is small compact cars.
That's true.
I mean I think the biggest.
They've made some other stuff, but
yeah, but I mean for the most part, I would say like the biggest, like the physically biggest sports car would probably have to be the R35 GTR, because that's a really big car.
True.
Like if you ever compared like the R34 to the R35, it looks like it's about 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet longer. Mm-hmm. It's huge. And that's, in my opinion, that like without having to do any research, it would probably be the biggest car that Japan's made as a sports car.
And if we're wrong on that, please correct us.
Yeah, absolutely.
As a sports car, mind you, we're not.
Yeah, not like
I just know that somebody's getting ready to hop on that keyboard, get in the comment section, and go, "Well, I saw a minivan one time."
But like, okay, so back in the day, Nissan had the 240Z.
Right.
That came out in like 1968, I believe, as a 1969.
So the car really came out right as the pony car genre was starting to take off.
Right. And it has a long nose, yes, it has a sports car look to it, but all Japan made was small cars. And the engine options, there really weren't any, because for the most part, Japan usually sticks with one engine, and maybe throughout the years they'll build or fine tune that engine. Now maybe in modern day you'll see like a Toyota Camry with a 4-cylinder or a V6, but that doesn't really qualify as a sports car to me.
And see, throughout the history of and I'm going to say the Fair Lady Z, because our conversation has expanded beyond just the 350 and the 370. Yeah. While it's not true anymore, I would say that used to you did have an engine option with those cars. While the engines were the same, Japan made... in the United States, we tend to have this concept of if you want a car to go faster, you put a bigger engine in it. Mm-hmm. More cylinders, more liters, just as large as you can find, and we generally don't want to turbocharge or supercharge or whatever. Japan, on the other hand, was content with the engine that they had and said, we want to make it faster, so they'd slap a turbo on it. A perfect example of that would be the 300ZX. Came out and had a turbo option, and then later on when they got to the second generation 300ZX, it also had a twin turbo option. And I would argue that you had your base car, that would be like your Mustang V6, and then you had your 300 horsepower twin turbo, that would be your Mustang GT. And I would even go to the point of to compare the car to the Camaro and the Trans Ams, which always featured T-tops. Mm-hmm. The 300ZX also came with T-tops and was available in convertible options as well.
Yeah, the 350Z, when it came out, I think it had about 5 options, but they were very subtle differences until you get to like the track version, and then later on they came out with the Nismo, and between the base and the Nismo, yes, there were huge differences, but at the same time they were still using the VQ35. And the Nismo, you couldn't really find those, and I mean they looked amazing, honestly. I mean, yes, they're really expensive. Even with the 370Zs, I'm wanting to say they're about 15 to 20 grand more from the base to the to the Nismo, and they're still hard to find. Okay, for example, like if you're going down the street and you see a Mustang GT, well, I mean, your first impression is, okay, it's a Mustang GT. If you go down the street and see a Nismo 350Z or a 370Z, you break your neck looking at it, and you're like, that looks really good. I don't even think I've ever seen one before.
I don't think. I actually think that our Nissan dealership had one in for a few weeks.
Yeah.
But I'll give you that. I don't think I've ever seen a Nismo privately owned driving down the street.
I think actually one of our friends at the local car meet just bought one, a 370Z Nismo. But he's in the
Still
military.
Haven't seen it though.
At my old job, I worked like transporting cars a lot, and there was a 350Z Nismo for sale, and that was the only one I've ever seen in real life before, and it looked spectacular. It looked like a supercar sitting over there. Obviously, it wasn't, but it looked great. I mean, it over everything else there, over the Corvettes, over the Subaru BRZs that have just recently came out. It broke my neck looking at that, and I didn't even notice the other cars. I mean, it's there's a sense of rarity with it, especially over the Mustang.
That's true. I'll give you that. But see, now I would say that there are a lot of similarities between the two, and that I'm not necessarily saying that when Japan made the car that they were trying to somehow create an exact replica of the American pony car, and that they were just copying the United States with what we had done with the Mustang, Camaro, and Challenger. But instead, I would argue that Japan was taking what was a concept, and a successful concept, and they were adding their own flair to it when they came out with the Fairlady. That they looked at a population that was willing to buy small, inexpensive cars that looked and felt sporty. And I would point out that most of your early pony cars that were sold, and even throughout pony cars' entire history, the vast majority of the cars that were sold were not your high-performance V8 monsters that we all love to point to when we talk about the Mustangs and the Camaros. Mm-hmm. But that instead, the ones that made the vast majority of your sales were your V6s, because people didn't really care as much about having the power as much as feeling like they had that power. And you had a lot of people that would go and just buy a car that they thought made them feel that way, and they didn't necessarily spend the penny to actually get the power behind it, which is all too often what we mock Mustang V6s for being.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking the whole time you were explaining that.
But
it kind of defines a V6 American car owner to me.
But that's exactly what the Fairlady Z Roadster appealed to. Was you had the people who wanted something that felt and looked sporty, but didn't necessarily have to run like a Mustang GT. It didn't have to go in a straight line like your crazy built Camaros did. And while Nissan eventually got there with offering the turbos with the 300ZX and now the Nismo, and it's not something that was originally part of that concept.
I see what you mean, but at the same time, I still have to revert back to it being the only car of its class, in the manufacturer specific vehicle lineup. If it does, to me, it has to have some kind of big brother, like we said at the beginning. It just has to. Like, to me, if a pony car is going to be a pony car, there has to be something better than it in its manufacturer. Like right now, I wouldn't really consider the R35 GTR as its big brother, because it's a completely different category, and it's all-wheel drive, and it's a completely different chassis and everything. unlike today they have the turbo 4-cylinder, the V6, and the V8, like Camaros and Mustangs. They have 3 different cars, or 3 different engines for one car.
So you're making the argument that one of the points that was discussed for a pony car to be a pony car was the variety available. You're making the argument that that's what the 350Z does not need in order to be because they're too similar. There aren't enough options to make the cars individual.
Right. Because
whereas now you have 3, like you said, different 3 different options among one car, like the Mustang, and then even then you could argue that you have your Shelby GT350s and then your GT500s,
right?
And that you've got so many different options.
Exactly, and like even just using the 350Z, the only time that the engine was different between the chassis was only whenever they decided to change everything as a whole. So like one year they came, the first year I believe it was 287 horsepower, the very first year it came out, and then later on they bumped it up to like 300 or so, and then I think they bumped it up to like 305 or something like that, and they did all of that as a whole, maybe with the exception of the Nismo, but I'm not positive on that. But that's the only thing that I have to say about that is they only used one engine and they only changed it altogether.
All right. I really think that was a great discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of information that I took in and maybe slightly varied my opinion one way or another, probably an extreme with both of them, honestly. But there's a lot to consider about this particular subject.
It is, and it's an interesting subject to really sit down and look past the nation barrier.
Or the fanboy inside of us.
Exactly. To sit down and look at a car and say, could this... Because all too often we look at the Fair Lady and we say, oh, well, it can't be a pony car because it's Japanese. But why? Why can't the Japanese build a pony car? Does it have to be American? If it has all of the characteristics and it was just built in the wrong country, is it any less of a pony car? And I'm not trying to say that that's the conclusion that we've come to. I'm just saying that it's interesting to sit and look and see, especially between Japan and the United States, two areas of the car scene that clash so often, and realize that there's a lot in common between prominent cars on both sides. So I think this was a great discussion.
Absolutely.
I hope you guys enjoyed it. And please put in the comments anything that you want to see us talk about. We're looking for high ticket, high controversy topics here. We've got a couple lined up, but we want to see what you guys got. What do you feel passionately about? And just let us know, and we will see you all next time on Car Theory.
All right, we'll see you guys.
Goodbye.
Bye.